Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Good morning, Patricia.
Morning, Keith.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing all right, yeah.
Good. How's Clea managing things?
Pretty well, all things considered. She's mostly unfazed by everything that we deal with in the course of the day, so
Good.
it's all good.
That's
How
good.
about there?
She's okay. She's getting a little bored of online school, but
Oh yeah,
nothing you can do. So
yeah.
she'll
Is
be a
there?
senior next year. She's hoping she gets to actually go to school. But
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. I couldn't remember what year this was for her, so
she's
yeah,
already a junior. God, I can't believe it.
yeah. Having senior year in person would be a good thing.
But
Very good
you
thing.
can only do what you can do, right?
That's right. But fingers crossed. Good morning, Patty. Good morning, Judith. Good morning, Joan. Things to have around in your space today are a ball, any ball, tennis ball, will do. A block would be really great. A bolster or something pillow-like is necessary. And if you can get over to a little patch of wall where you can lie down on the floor and have access to the wall with the soles of your feet, that would be really great. You'll be on your back, just kind of putting your feet on the wall. On any kind of hard surface, so that can be a bookshelf that has drawers or a closet door or anything sturdy, a door jamb. You will be applying pressure with your feet, so you don't want it to be something that if you push against that thing that you're going to break it and need to call someone to fix it. So keep that in mind. Good morning, Deborah. Have around in your space a ball, any kind of ball, a block, a bolster, and be able to get over to the wall where you can lie down on your back and put your soles to the wall. Good morning, Erica.
Good morning.
You need to have in your setup today a ball, any kind of ball, a block, a bolster, and be able to get over to the wall where you can put your soles against the wall while you're lying on your back. It doesn't have to be a wall, but it does need to be sturdy so that you can apply pressure with your feet against the wall.
Tennis ball, okay? Like that kind of size ball?
Tennis ball, any kind of ball that size. You give folks about 30 seconds more to show up if they're showing up. Patricia, your dog hasn't shown up yet.
She's laying right in front of me, between me and the computer. Waiting, biding her time.
You see what she can get involved in. Good. Let's go ahead and get started. Namaste, welcome. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to focus on a little activation and release, or activation and relaxation through some of the muscles around your hips. It's always a good thing to do, but I feel like in the wake of all the ice that was around, there's a lot of tightness in the hips, and that when that's happening leads to some tightness in your spine, which leads to how you walk changing. So just to have some time on the floor with the ball and get some muscles to maybe release a little bit, find some space in your hips. That's our purpose and focus for the day. So you can bring your hands into your heart if that works for you. And let your sitting bones get a little heavier into the ground, into your cushion, into your mat. Take a breath all the way in. Begin to let your hands drop away. And then you can start to navigate onto your back. And when you get to the floor, have the soles of your feet flat to your mat. Have your ball in reach, have your block in reach. And just settle for a moment, and when you've got yourself on the ground and your soles are down, your knees are bent, just take your hands and pad around the muscles of your hips and kind of feel the soft surfaces. And see if you can just notice if there's any tension already setting up in any of the muscles around your pelvis.
Hopefully you don't feel any tightness already just from being in this spot. And then bring your hands, so if you use your thumbs, back around what feels like the outer edge of your butt muscles. And if you can put your thumbs there, you can wrap your other 4 fingers around the front of your hip. Begin to lower your back into the mat. So you can curl your tailbone forward into the front of your body some. And then begin to lift your hips off the mat a few inches. And right where your thumbs are, you should feel the muscles turning on. Right? So there should be a new tightness there around the muscles. And if you were to travel back around toward the backside of your butt, that tightness and that activation should continue. So you've turned on all the muscles of your glutes. And right where you started your thumbs, I want you to keep your thumbs there and then lower your hips down to the mat. And then whichever side your ball is on, grab your ball, and right where your thumb was, place the ball into that space. And when you find that space, lean a little bit into the ball. So you put the ball into that space that should be around your gluteus medius. And you can lift your hip and you can move around on it. And you want to move your hip side to side across that space. So not going all the way back to the back side of your bum where the muscle gets really big and you get into glute maximus, but hanging out on that outer edge, not going so far around the edge that you get to any bone. And so you're avoiding the bone, but you're just moving around that spot where your thumb was and where the muscle turned on. And you'll need to pick up and adjust the ball and adjust your body here and there. If it's your left hip where the ball is, you can move both feet a little bit left so that both knees go a little bit left. If it's on the right, it's the opposite. So both feet would move a little bit to the right and both knees can angle to the right some. And then whatever hip has the ball, that leg can stretch out long. And then you continue to use the opposite leg. So I'm using my right foot to move my left hip around on the ball. And it won't necessarily be comfortable. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't be comfortable. But if it's sharp or seriously uncomfortable, you can back off a little bit. Maybe just use the thumb pad of your hand or the heel of your hand to try to massage that same spot. As you're working into it with your leg long, if you're using the ball, feel how you start to make your way more toward the side, more like you're going to roll onto your side. You're not getting there yet. Just focus on that space and feel how your body, because your knees have tilted, gets a little bit more into a side lying position. And then pause somewhere in that spot where you can feel like the ball is in the muscle and just let your body sink into it. So I'm using the ball under my left hip, so I'm going to take my right arm across my body, almost like I'm slow motion rolling over in bed, and bend my left knee, and then bend my right knee. So I end up more on my side now, but I'm trying to keep the ball right in that same spot, so it's against the same muscle. And then I can curl my right shoulder over a little bit more in front of my nose. And then once I'm there, truly on my side, my knees are no longer stacked with each other if they ever were. And then it's just a little pelvic movement. So I can move pubis to tail, tail to pubis, and then just move forward and back with that. So the ball has moved slightly back in space. So my hip is heavy to the ground, the hip bone, my outer hip around the greater trochanter is heavy to the ground. And the ball is, it's almost like it wants to shoot out behind me like a pez. And then just moving my pelvis. And you might have to adjust depending on what kind of fabric your pants are or what surface your mat is. If both surfaces are a little bit slippery, then sometimes you've got to adjust things, but moving around, same surface, glute medius. So you play with the different tilts of your pelvis to move around on the ball. Kind of looks like the way that when your dog is sleeping and dreaming and they're running in space on their side. Kind of feels like that. So there's this little shift to your pelvis and a letting go, curling in and a letting go. A few more breaths there. Good. And then you can reach behind your back, move the ball out of the way, and roll onto your back again. Give yourself a pause there and feel the residual action from the pressure that you're using the ball, or of the pressure where you were using the ball. And then if it helps, if you need to do a lift again to find the opposite muscle, you can do a little curl and lift, fire up the muscle, but hopefully you can just remember and kind of target with your thumb. And then the ball's going to go into the other hip now. Find your glute medius just so you don't slide. And then put some roll and some pressure onto the ball. And you can use your breath here, right? So that for me, the inhale is the roll that takes my hips more on top of the ball. And the exhale is the ball that retracts my hips back. So I'm moving laterally with my inhale, medially with my exhale. Noticing when the ball slips down to a new place, right? That's usually the moment where it suddenly feels like, oh, that's more comfortable. So you've moved away from that trickier spot of glute medius. And then eventually, if the ball is under your right hip, both feet can move a little bit right, so both knees can angle right. And then whatever hip has the ball, that leg stretches out long. And then you can use your bent leg, sole against the floor, to roll and shift your hips. And it wouldn't be weird if the two sides feel really different. They feel really uneven, right? Because most of us, our gait pattern and the way that we walk around tends to be a little bit uneven. So we feel things in an uneven way in the body. And then pause and let your body weight sink so the ball can absorb some of your hips, some of your muscle. And then you can start to roll toward your side, so piece by piece, because if you go quickly, it's jarring and you'll probably slide off the ball. But if you roll very slowly toward your side, so that both knees can be bent there, you don't lose the ball. And then you play with these tilts through your pelvis. So pubis to tail and then tail to pubis. And with the depth in the hip crease. See if you can let your head feel heavy. It's very confusing for dogs when you do this on the floor because they think, why are you doing this with this ball that you should be throwing to me? You're going to want to take it when it comes out. few more breaths on this side. Good. And you can reach behind you, slip the ball out, and roll to your back. Move the ball just off to the side for a moment, or where it's not going to roll away. And grab your block. And then your block's going to go between your knees. So the middle width is probably nice for most people. The skinniest width is possible, but it always feels a little bit more clampy and a little more squeezed than you want. So if you can go for the middle height, and then it goes between your thighs away from the knee joint. So you can go up to your knee joint and then slide down a little bit just so that you're just above that bony surface. Narrow your feet some. So you have to apply some pressure to hold onto the block so it doesn't just slip. It's not just sitting there, you do have to do something, right? And then do that same investigation around your hips. So you can use your fingers around the front of your hip crease, feel what's going on there. Find the bony surface right at your hip point there. And then notice the muscle around it. So if you can find that bony hip point, and put your fingers right there, your index and your middle finger on there, and then your thumbs can just rest naturally close to glute medius where you were, but not quite. And then I want you to squeeze the block some more and see if by your middle fingers you can feel the muscle turn on. There might be a little natural curling of your tailbone that happens when you squeeze. Right? You can feel action deep in there, and then soften that. Then pick both feet up from the floor, and right where your middle finger is, there should be some action. And then begin to open your feet outward away from the block. So your knees are staying at the block and your feet swing out. And then right where your middle fingers are, there should be a lot of action. And if you travel outward from there, you should find a nice pop of muscle, right? So it's still near your hip point, but it's really right in that pocket of the hip crease, right? And then undo that and put your feet to the floor. And keep your hands in that space. So that should be right the lower edge of some bone, nice pocket. And then pick it up again. Open out your feet and see if you can find that pocket. So that's the spot. And then drop your feet, move the block out, and then right where that pocket is, place the ball. So you're trying to get the ball right into that pocket of space. And then flip yourself over onto your belly and have the ball in that pocket. And then move around a little bit on that pocket of space. So you're watching out for your hip point. So you don't want to have the ball against the bone. You want to have it just below the bone and just toward the outside. You're going to get a little bit creative with the positioning of your legs. So I've got the ball underneath my right hip and I've got a bend in my left knee to help maneuver around. Some circles, some side to side. So getting closer to what should be a little bit of like biceps femoris, which starts up at your hip and goes down toward your knee. Just moving around on that space. And sometimes it'll feel like you hit a little bump, especially when you're moving back toward your midline. So try to avoid that bumpiness and move a little less toward the midline when you are going in. This one could be a little bit sharper
a lot more sensation. So just honor what you feel. Tennis balls are more forgiving. They'll feel friendlier. If you're using more of a therapeutic ball or lacrosse ball, then it can be a lot there. And you could lay something soft on top of it and still do this kind of roll. You could put a blanket over the ball and work into the space. A bit more padding. When the ball feels like it's traveling lower down your leg, just bring it back up. Remember, not on the bone. If you put when you're lying on your belly, you can put your middle finger, index finger on your hip point. The ball should be sitting like a finger space lower than that hip point. And give yourself a few more movements here on this side. Good, and then you can lift your hip, move the ball, drop your hip into the ground. And you can stay here on your belly, and if you use the opposite side, so middle finger, index finger on a hip point, find the bone. Slide your fingers down to the front edge or the lower edge of the bone, and then about a finger's distance, finger width, below that space. That's where you want to set the ball. And make sure that you're really in that space, so keep a finger on the bone at first. And then start to maneuver around on that. It's under my left hip, so I'm going to put a band in my right knee and let my right knee come out to the right side. It helps maneuver. It's a little bit more body weight into the ball when I do that. Turn to the pocket where the ball is into a shallower space. A lot of walking around on icy surfaces will tighten up these spaces. For sure, yeah. We also want to be able to walk on icy surfaces and have these muscles help stabilize the experience so that when we do hit a patch that feels a little less secure, that we want the musculature of our legs, the musculature of our hips to hold things where they're supposed to be, keep us from falling. So it's always this fine balance of finding the action, finding the strength, but also keeping things pliable and flexible. Because both are necessary. It's always best if we can avoid injury, avoid accident, avoid slip and fall. But you know, the reality is we can't avoid all of it. Unless we do nothing, and that's not really an option, right? A little bit more on this side. Good. Then lift yourself off the ball. Pause here on your belly for just a moment. And then you can use your hands to press toward all fours. Bring your knees underneath your hips. And then if you can shift yourself a little closer to the wall now, so that you can lie on your back. And bring your feet to the wall. So I'm going to get closer than I need to first. So that when I lie back on my back, if I were to put both feet up on the wall, my knees are just slightly bigger than 90 degrees. And then I want to move back a smidgen, just a smidge from that. So that when I bring my feet up now to the wall, the degree of bend in my knee has gotten a little bit bigger. So I'm going to stretch my left leg over to the left a little bit, but I still have some bend in my left knee. And then I'm going to pull my right knee toward my chest. And when I do that, I use my right palm to press it into the top of my right leg. So near the base of the thigh muscle, hooking right into the knee. And I'm going to push my knee into my hand and push my hand into my knee. And at the same time, I'm pressing my left foot into the wall. So I'm pressing away with one foot and pulling in with the opposite leg. And then switch that. So my right foot to the wall, pull back with my left knee, and then I'm pushing my knee against my hand and pressing my foot against the wall. So these opposite forces. And then as you switch in and out of that, you stay for a beat or two with each side, I want you to notice what you feel across your sacrum. So right at the back of your pelvis. So you can press into the ridge surfaces right at the back of your pelvis, and then see if you can anchor toward the ground with your sacrum. Switching after a couple of beats to each leg. Hopefully you feel more contact with your sacrum, with your pelvis, into the ground as you do that. If you're not, notice what your low back is doing. So you do, as a result of pressing in both directions, your abdominals turn on some, but if you can get them to turn on more, then you get more surface connect to the ground. So you can do that by lowering your low back into the ground some more as you're pressing in these two directions. You should feel your abdominals turn on, and that should give you a stronger contact with your sacrum to the mat. But the pressing in both directions is important, right? Erica, bring your feet up a little bit higher on the wall. Yeah. Whatever leg is the leg pressing the wall, it never gets 100% lengthened out. Right? So there's always some bend in your knee. So you don't want to get into aggravating your knee. A few more times here. Last couple for each leg. One more for each side.
Good. And then drop both feet to the floor. Have both knees bent for a moment, and just let your knees drop into your midline so your two knees touch. And hopefully that gives you a sense of space across your sacrum. And see if you can imagine your inhale going all the way back to that space across your pelvis. So by having these opposite presses and pulls with your legs, you're definitely firing in your abdominals and you're allowing your hip flexors to work a little bit. So the bent leg is a strong hip flexor action. But the two actions together with your two legs tug and tilt through your sacrum and the muscles around your sacrum, as well as the joint that sits around your sacrum where it fits in with your ilium. Give yourself one more breath. Good, and then you can roll to your side, make your way back over to your mats, away from the wall. You don't need the wall anymore. And then when you're lying down on your back, have your block ready. And it can be the flat height or the middle height that you use, but slide the block under your sacrum now. So that same zone of what you were experiencing before. And it might be a little higher than you expect it to be, right? Because you want to make sure that you're really setting the block across the bony surfaces. So it supports your pelvis. And that should, with your knees bent here, give you a sense of openness on the front side of your pelvis. If it feels like strain or too much, and you've got a level to go down, you can always go down to the flat level. Give yourself a whole breath in here. And then bend your right knee and bring your right knee toward your chest. So that's already going to tell you a little bit about where you are on the block. So if you suddenly feel less stable, you might press your right foot back down, move the block a centimeter higher up into your pelvis, and then draw your knee up again. So it shouldn't feel like you're about to fall off of anything. And it's just your right hand that needs to hold onto your knee. And then start to stretch your left leg so your left heel stays out on the floor. So you get a stronger sense of openness across the front of your left hip, down that whole length. And then if you use your middle finger and ring finger, find the bony surface on the front of your hip there again. And then just go down a little bit and internally some. So away from the outer edge, just to the inside. So find some soft tissue, which should feel pretty taut there. Take a breath in, and then press your sacrum against the block and lift your left leg a smidgen off the floor. And then lower it down again, and then lift it up again. And you're paying attention to what you feel right where your fingers are. So when the leg comes up, there's a little deepening of that pocket. You might be able to get your fingers in a little bit more. And then when your leg gets heavy, it gets a little bit more taut, and your fingers feel like they're pushed back to the surface. And then every time that your leg comes down, see if you can make it feel longer. It's reaching away, drawing up, reaching away. No need to flex your foot here, right? So your left foot is just hanging out at the end of your ankle. And you can trace that bony surface where your fingers are. You can go up toward your belly space and follow it, and feel the shape of it. And then when you're going up and down, you don't feel the change in the muscle, right? So then if you trace the bone again, and go lower toward your leg, when you get toward that lower edge of it, you can really feel how the muscle is playing in that space. couple more lifts there. Good. And then bend your left knee. Drop the sole of your left foot flat. Drop the sole of your right foot flat. And then as you pick up your left knee, move outward so your left knee moves more toward your left shoulder. So rather than toward the ceiling. And then let your left hand catch your knee there. Your right sole is still on the ground. Opening out from your midline. So you might feel a little bit more length through the inseam of your left leg now. And then you can use your left hand like a little pancake to support your outer leg as your left leg extends out to the left. So I just wrapped my fingers around the back of my left knee, my left elbow on the ground, and allowed my left leg to get long out to the side. If I press into my right foot and try to slide my hips maybe an inch or so to the right, it'll change the heaviness of my leg. So by moving my hips a little right of center, I've changed the heaviness of my left leg, and then you should start to feel a little tug that goes all the way over to your right hip point. So the weight of your left leg triggering space from your right hip point all the way into the inseam of your left leg. And still breathing through all of that, right? So there's a full breath to your belly. And you might notice that when you breathe in, you've got more space in your back. Feel your lumbar increase. Last couple of breaths there. And then let your left knee bend where it is and guide your left leg back in. Set down your left foot and then even yourself out on the block again. Let your sacrum get heavy. And then check out the other side. So when you draw your left knee up, it's going to come straight up, so your thigh is coming toward your chest, your left hand on your left knee. Then stretch your right leg out long. Resist wanting to pull your left knee in, right? You're just holding onto the knee so it kind of stays where it is. Use your right middle finger and your index finger, find the front of your right hip point. Find the bony surface there. And then once you've got the bony surface, go inward a little bit. So you move toward your midline. You move medially there. And then lift your leg and lower your leg. And check out the difference in the pocket of space. Using the exhale to lift your leg. Remembering that every time your leg goes toward the ground, you try to make it longer. Add some space along the front side of your hip. A few more times like that. And one more lift there. And once your foot comes back down, bend your right knee, set down your right sole, drop your left sole. Pause for a moment. And then when your right knee starts to come up into a bend, it moves outward toward the right. And you might already feel like you're kind of falling off. Okay? So you can make a little adjustment and move your hips left on the block. And then once you've got your right knee up and out, you can use your right hand like the pancake and open your right leg long to the right. And there might be another little roll under, moving more of your right hip onto the block. So it feels like you can give some more weight to your right leg. Pay attention to your inner left hip point, all the way over to the inside of your right thigh. Your elbow is like a little kickstand, just so that your leg can sit into your hand. Notice where anything wants to get tight. It's like around your left hip, around your left glutes. If you just occasionally pad around and notice where things are gripping, see if you can let go of that. And then come back to this natural undulation that is part of your breath. Remembering that if it's ever sharp or uncomfortable, that you leave it behind before I might mention it. Okay? Just because we're still in it, just because I'm still asking you to be in it, does not mean that you have to be in it. Just a few more breaths here. And then right where your leg is, put a bend into your knee. And then let your sole drop. Even yourself onto the block. And then move the block out from underneath you. And you can move the block over to the side. Roll to your side. Come on up. Find your bolster. Start on all fours. And if you lay the bolster sort of across what is the front of your space, you're going to set up your legs so it's a little pigeon-like and not quite pigeon, right? So I'm going to put my right shin behind the bolster. So I can bring my knee right over to it, my ankle right over to it. And on the opposite side, I'm going to put my leg into a similar 90-degree shape. So I'll flip for a second so you can see that a little bit better. So that my left knee is in a similar 90-degree bend. So just setting that up where I can sit up tall. When I'm sitting up tall here, my right ankle, my right knee is mostly on the ground, my right hip is heavy. My left knee touches the ground, but there's a little space underneath my left hip. So by sitting up tall here, I can really feel how there's space being added around my left inner hip, right around where my sitting bone is. But I have to be careful not to squeeze in my left glute or to try to push forward with my glutes to flatten my left hip. So I'm going to sit up and find some depth in my left hip crease. Not by forcing that either, because when I find the depth, I can feel space across my left glute, so on a deeper level, right?
I can't really get to experience gluten minimus. We can't really get in there and touch that one. But when I sit up this way, I can feel gluten minimus having a little bit more space. And then once you feel like you've got that space, you can walk your hands toward your bolster and pause for a moment. So I've framed my foot and my knee. I'm going to take my left arm and cross over toward the bolster. So that just allows me to fold a little bit closer to the bolster, and I might stay right there. Or I can use my left forearm as a landing pad for my head and bring my head down to the bolster. And what hopefully you notice there is now that you've hinged forward, the focus isn't as much on your left hip, but around your right hip. And when I get there, I might feel like a little stuck, and I can do a tiny lift of my hip, deep in my right hip crease, so I land a little bit more on the edge of my sitting bone, and then I can drop my right elbow down. So here's where it feels kind of pigeon-like, but it's not actually pigeon. Giving some space now to your right hip. Your left knee might want to nudge forward toward your right heel once you get down, closing things in. So just notice that. Try to keep it where it started. If coming down low to your head resting on your forearm is a lot, you can always just pause somewhere in the hinge on your way toward the bolster. You might find that both arms make their way onto the bolster eventually. Once you subtract your right elbow from the ground and it's no longer supporting you in the fold, you might feel like a much more dramatic opening across your right hip. If that feels like too much, you can always bring your right elbow back down onto the mat. When things get challenging in your right hip, your left leg is going to start gripping. And so see if you can keep the muscles in your left leg from firing more than they do when they're just sitting there on the bone. So just a few more breaths on this leg. And exhale out of your mouth. And then start to work your way back up. And then you're going to change it around, so now your left shin is going to set up behind the bolster. If you can bring your knee close to the bolster and the front of your ankle close to the bolster, and then you start in this seat. So simply sitting up. The weight in your left hip now, left ankle, right knee, right ankle. That same float underneath your right sitting bone, underneath your right butt cheek. And always have your fingers on the ground, tenting. Maybe it's better for you to have your hands on your body, right hand on your right knee, left hand somewhere on your left calf. Noticing your tendency to want to push or force forward your right hip. So sink a little softness into it. And when you feel like you can sit without a ton of effort, that's a good signal that, there's the space.
And then you can move on by crossing your right arm over by your left knee toward the bolster. So that brings your right ribs around. Might be a little adjustment with your left hip lifting and dropping again. And you can stop there with your forearm and your left palm supporting. Or you might drop down to your left elbow and then drop your forehead onto your forearm. Maybe your left forearm crosses onto the bolster. Notice when your right leg wants to turn on more than it needs to. Nice thing about this 90-90 leg version of pigeon is you can focus on your front leg, the left leg in this case, without getting into your right hip flexor in the same degree. Right? The change of experience. Give yourself a couple more breaths. Exhale out of your mouth. And use your hands to sit yourself up. And then bring the soles of your feet together in a loose diamond shape. Have your bolster come up on your feet, and it might wedge, so it's kind of at the lower wedge, angle back to you. And then you hinge forward either with your forehead coming to the bolster or your forearms coming to the bolster and then your head resting on top of them. So you have a lot of space across your low and middle back, across your sacrum, across your pelvis, coming into this Tarasana. But not getting into a big roundness in your upper back. Right? So focusing on the space in your middle and low back without feeling like you're closing off your throat or adding extra roundness to your upper back. And then you're paying attention to what your head feels like, what your neck feels like. Because as you get more space through your low back and you fold a little bit more, your head will take on more weight. So you can always begin to shift the bolster a little bit flatter so it can lay down across your shins, still with a higher edge toward you. And you can stack your hands on it, rest your head there. Try to breathe down to your belly. When you breathe down to your belly, it also accentuates the space across your back. And your bolster might slip down a little bit flatter onto your feet, so your forearms can stack a little bit further away. don't ever let it become strain, right? So if it feels like the fold is a strain, then back up a little bit. You should feel like the way that something sinks into memory foam, incremental deepening. Through the layers. You might find that you take your forearms out of the picture, your forehead, simply rest on the bolster, either with your arms draping over the bolster or down at the outer edges of your bolster. Whatever depth you're at, move your head side to side a little bit. Give yourself a few more breaths there. Big exhale out of your mouth. And then ease yourself up to sit. And you can roll down to your back for rest. As you're shifting down to your back, have a moment where you pause with the soles of your feet flat and just do that same padding around your hip muscles, around your bum, and notice if you feel any difference from where you started. I think you'll definitely be more aware of those muscles, but notice if you feel any more space to your touch, if they feel. And you can stretch your legs out when you're ready and drop into the floor. Namah Shivaya Shivoham Shivoham Namah Shivaya Shivoham Shivoham Shivo Shivoham Shivoham Shivo Shivoham Shivoham Namah Shivaya Shivoham Shivoham Namah Shivaya Shivoham Shivoham Mahadeva Shivoham Mahadeva Shivoham Mahadeva Shivoham Shivoham Shivoham
Shivoham. Start to breathe deeply again. Start to move around. Roll to your side with bent knees. Come on up to sit and bring your hands together at your heart. Breathe in. We are one life, we are one light, and we are one love. I vow honoring the divine in each of you. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be well, be good, be kind. Enjoy the melt. Watch out for ice at night. And hope to see you again soon.
Love the openness that you increased in my front part of my hips there.
Oh, I'm glad.
Oh, it feels good. Thank you.
You're welcome, Patty. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Bye. See you, Patricia.